Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. I've been waiting for this for a while. If you don't know, Billy Carson, Forbidden Knowledge. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, had a lot to say. Apparently, after that podcast, he got into a debate with an actual Christian scholar, for lack of a better term. I mean, this guy's really, he knows about this stuff a lot. They got into a debate. It ended very badly for Billy, and Billy just lashed out at everybody involved. Now Joe Rogan is actually talking to that man. His name is Wesley Huff, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about that. So now what we're going to go through is just Joe talking to him about that whole debate situation. Joe's been awakened to the fraud of Billy Carson, and I know some of you guys love him. I get it, 100%, but a lot of what he says is straight up fugazi. He should not position himself as an expert. He should just be a guy who's just saying what he thinks. That's what he should do. But we'll talk about that after. I'm going to show you that clip. Then I'm going to show you the breakdown of everything that happened within the debate. I'm going to show you clips from the debate where Billy's getting owned very politely. I'm going to show you that and then show you some other stuff. And then we're going to end it there. Let's get right into it. Start with the Joe Rogan. As always,
the debate that you had with Billy Carson.
Quote unquote.
You know, it's one of those things where it's very unfortunate when people get caught with their pants down. And I'm not an expert in many things, but the things that I am an expert on, you could wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and ask me about those things. And I go, oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
Yeah.
I know, you know, like martial arts or comedy. I could give you an expert version of reality. It seems like he does not have that. And he is a wonderful talker, and it's a lot of fun. I like watching his videos. I love all that ancient history stuff, and even the most ridiculous tinfoil hat aspects of ancient. It's fun.
It's entertainment.
But I know that there's a different. Like Andrew Schultz and I had a discussion about this. Like he said when he had Billy on the podcast, he said we're not going to research anything. We're not going to search anything. We're not going to do anything. We'll just let him talk because it's fun.
Yeah.
Andrew's awesome. But when he was on with you, it was quite apparent that you are an actual expert in the Bible and in many religious texts, and that he didn't necessarily have the facts straight. So what was the fallout of all of that?
Well, it's interesting you say the expert thing, because I literally was asked to do it 24 hours beforehand. So I had like the least amount of preparation going into it. And I was okay with that because I'd listened to Billy Carson. Well, and I'd listened to the stuff he'd said. So I knew enough about the ways that he'd articulated things about the ancient Near East and the Bible and Christianity to know enough that his level is pretty surface. But the fallout was that not only did he not want us to release the conversation, but then he started throwing out cease and desist letters. And then he started, trying to sue people. So, I mean, I was never worried because I'm a Canadian, and anybody who's tried to sue internationally knows that.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah. As far as I understand it, he would have had to file a claim in a Canadian court that would have been reviewed to have legal precedence. That he'd have to prove that he could win.
What was his argument?
Apart from the fact that he was embarrassed that he lost?
Well, yeah, that's not really an argument, right?
Well, the cease and desist letter, the cease and desist letter said, I don't want you to use my name or my face in anything going forward, and anything you've used up until this point, you need to remove. And I was given 24 hours notice to do this.
But if you're a public figure, he's clearly a public figure. Is that even, can you actually say? No,
you can't do it.
So what was does he have a lawyer that wrote the cease and desist? Is he a lawyer?
No. So it's interesting because Mark Menard, who was the guy who hosted this interaction, he sent Mark a handwritten one, and then he eventually gave Mark an official one from his lawyer. So I actually was sent one by his lawyer, which I, screenshotted, posted publicly online and said, I'm going to ignore this. And then, but he'd sent Mark, who was the podcast host, as far as I'm aware, numerous cease and desists, and Anton, who was the media manager. He'd sent a number of cease and desists.
It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
When you get caught with your pants down, you're supposed to say, I got caught with my pants down.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. It's the only, especially if you're public, it's very clear that you're incorrect.
Well, the irony of the situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash that it's made. And we told him that. We said, hey, Barbra Streisand effect is going to happen.
Yeah.
You're a big enough personality that if I make a video and say like, hey, I had this conversation, didn't go well for Billy, and Billy doesn't want it released, that's going to start to gain traction sooner or later.
Yeah. It's, the problem is to really delve into these subjects. It takes a tremendous amount of research, years and years and years of research. You really have to know what you're talking about. Most of us don't.
Well, and especially with languages.
Yes.
Like, we didn't get into it. I hoped to have, in our initial conversation, kind of press him a little bit more on the more overt things he'd said about, like, Greek and Hebrew and Sumerian. Because I've studied a number of ancient languages, and when you study the languages, you realize the complexities of these things. And so when someone hasn't, and they're making statements that are obviously indicative of someone who hasn't studied them, it's super apparent.
Right.
And so I think it's one thing to be making claims about, say, like Christian history or the Bible, but when you start to get into like linguistics and philology, it gets messy. And if you don't know what you're talking about, it gets really apparent really fast.
So the gentleman who brought the two of you together, what was his goal? Like, what was he trying to do, and how did he approach you?
Yeah, so he's friends, or I should say was friends. He was friends with Billy. They live in the same neighborhood.
Oh, boy.
So it's actually become really, it's become pretty rough for him. So he released a video yesterday, which I think people should go and check out, where he kind of gives his perspective. He's been friends with Billy for years. He was at Billy's wedding. Oof. Billy had 15 people at his wedding. Oof. Mark was one of them. And they live in this community in Florida. Their sons are friends. Their wives would hang out. Oof. And Mark told me, he's like, I've been hearing Billy say, he wants to debate. Nobody will debate him for years. And so as far as I think Mark was concerned, he was giving Billy the opportunity that Billy had told a lot of people he wanted.
Right.
And so this was set up in that Mark and Billy have been talking. They've been on each other's podcasts in the past, and they've been friends, but more like business colleagues. Like, Mark has come out and said, I hadn't really gone into the stuff he'd said about Christianity or ancient religions or whatever that much. Mark he's a Christian. He has like a public profession of faith, and him and Billy had talked about the fact that they wanted to talk about like faith stuff and some of their differences, and that Mark was kind of prepping for this, and his media manager, Anton, had sent him some of my stuff and said, like, Wes has done some stuff on some things that Billy has talked about. And, maybe you should look up some of this stuff, read into it. And Mark, very last minute, was like, well, I feel inadequate. Do you think I could just ask Wes? And so he DM'd me on Instagram and just kind of laid this out like, hey, I'm going to have Billy in my studio in 24 hours. I can tell him you're coming, can tell him who you are. I can like give him your background, but would you be willing to come? And so that's what I did. And so that's how it got set up.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but was Billy aware that this was going to be a debate, or did he think it was going to be just a discussion? Like, what did he think it was going to be?
No, he'd been given all of the prerequisites. Like, he knew we're going to go over some of his stuff that he'd said about Christianity, that I was going to come in, who I was, what my name was, some of my background, and that part of the conversation was going to be me kind of asking him some clarifying questions and rebutting some of the things that he said. So you didn't watch the 3-hour live stream that he did you?
I watched chunks of it.
Okay.
I watched a little bit, I'm like, oof, and then I shut it off, then I watched a little bit more, oof.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Billy there says he had no idea going in. And I mean, as Mark said in his video that he released yesterday, I mean, that's patently false. He knew what it was going to be, who was going to be involved, and even some of the things that we would be talking about.
Okay. And he also was claiming that it wasn't a debate, that he had been involved in debates before, and that he would prepare for debates, but this is something he didn't prepare. But again, it's like, if you ask me about things that I know about, you can wake me up out of a full sleep and give me a couple seconds. I'll go, oh, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And if you know, you know.
And it wasn't a debate in one sense. Like, it wasn't. Like, we didn't do opening statements and cross-examination and rebuttal.
Right.
It really was a conversation.
Right.
And it only kind of turned into a debate in the sense that Billy, I think, got caught out. And so the things that were talked about kind of showed that, that he needed to go on the offense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's all very unfortunate, but believe that they are, and they don't want to do the work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why experts themselves feel a lot of inadequacy is because they study a subject and realize like in religion and politics and like all sorts of things, right?
In everything. In everything. I mean, I think because people want to, like, it's very difficult to be an expert in a subject. And I think people want to believe that they are and they don't want to do the work.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why, experts themselves feel a lot of inadequacy is because they study a subject and realize like, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this hole.
Right.
So unfortunately,
most subjects are very, very nuanced and very deep.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you're talking about ancient religion.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about things that were a oral tradition for a long time before they were even written down. So it's a long trudge to get to the bottom of things.
Yeah. And part of the whole, like, what I was trying to get Billy in that conversation that I had with him to get to the bottom of partly was a question of methodology. Like, I think he got frustrated at me at one point because I kept asking, what are the criteria that you're using when you're looking at one source versus another source and coming up with a conclusion? Because in historiography, it's the inference to the best explanation. And so there are different ways that you go about that, different methodologies. And historians very rarely disagree on the data and the evidence. It's the conclusions that you draw from that.
Right.
But then there are some things that are just out and out false.
Man, very polite. I will say, and you'll see as I go through these clips here, that Wes was very much the same way Eric Weinstein was with Terrence Howard. Just very, not really attacking, but just being like, how'd you do this? Okay, but do you know about this? Okay, but we use this. Are you using that? You're not using that. Do you know how to read this equation? You don't know how to read this equation. Okay. Like, it was kind of like that. So let's just jump over here. Oh, this one's just for fun, though, before we get to the actual debate.
I'm not an expert in biblical text. I don't pretend to be. You happen to stumble into one of the world's foremost experts on biblical texts. I see stories kind of being extremely similar in certain areas where it seems as if, since these ancient texts were a little bit older than the biblical text, it seems as if some of it was somehow copied or rewritten or reinterpreted. And they discovered the gospel of Jesus. His wife and professor at the University of Harvard, brought it to their attention and it's in the Harvard Seminary. They did say that it could have been that maybe he got married, maybe he had kids, maybe the Merovingian bloodline is still on this planet till this very day. Did you know that in the Sinai Bible, which predates the King James Bible, Jesus was never even crucified, guys? He lived on, got married, never got crucified.
If Satan started a Bible study, this is how it would look like. Bringing an ex-Christian scholar and Billy Carson, who still claims that Jesus was married.
So the reason I show you that clip is because that is something that they touch on a little bit in the debate. What do I have here for you guys? Just like a quick little breakdown here of what Billy was saying after the debate. Actually, you know what? Let's just get to the debate, and I'll show you that clip afterwards. Let's just get to them actually interacting. I'm going to shrink this screen for you guys so they're both on the screen here. You see Wes there. Boom. Billy Carson in the corner. Gentleman in the middle here is getting sued, and so's Wes. But let's just check this first part out. This is just them kind of getting into it at first about, where they're both coming from, and just listen to this.
Be able to interact with you, because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt. But I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay, that's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library, so you can go and see it. It's on display, and the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring, when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the viewers or listeners or whatever be able to see that
right now to make sure I have the version that I'm looking at?
While he's pulling that up too, like I keep saying, I'm just curious, like the Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of 1st century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian, and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it
Is that the
has the
papyrus by
crucifixion.
any chance?
Yeah, so papyrus is just the what it's made out of. So
I got that from ChatGPT, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
guys, I'm just
I
trying
can
to sound
actually
smart for a second.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, that's
so I'll show you this. So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer.
I'm just going to stop it there. This guy buys his own papyrus and does this for the love of the game. This is crazy. So basically, what I'm just showing you here is, there's certain things that Billy will be like, oh, I'm referring to this. This guy's like, well, that's actually a known forgery. Then he picks apart the other thing that he brought up beforehand, and it just goes on like that for 2 hours. Now, I'm also going to give you timestamps on that one. If you wanted a timestamp of that full little tidbit there, it'd probably be going 9 minutes, 56 seconds. And again, Wes Huff, he has a YouTube channel. 9 minutes, 56 seconds, all the way to about 20 minutes, 25 seconds about, where they just discuss that, where they're getting into that. I'm going to show you another clip here where we're getting into God and gender, basically. And again, this is more learning for Billy Carson, but he does not take it that way. This whole time, it seems like, and you can't see it on him, but it seems like he's furious. And I shouldn't say it seems like he's furious. He must have been furious, because when he left, and I'll show you the way that he leaves, actually. He leaves in one big rant and then just kind of walks out. But he must have been mad the whole time that this was happening. But this is actually a very polite teaching of how things should be happening. He's even saying, I'm a historian, and this is how historians work, and we make sure to use this methodology. Again, it's very much like Eric Weinstein sitting down with Terrence Howard. It's kind of showing him like, you're not really on my level, but I'm not going to really break you down and like hold you to the fire that way. But we are going to discuss some things, and I am going to call out the things that you're saying that are just fallacies. Now, this is getting into the gender of God.
You keep saying that God's a he.
Yep.
And so where do you get that from?
Well, throughout both the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament, you have the masculine singular pronoun used for God.
And why is God a man? Where's the evidence of this?
Well, God isn't a man. See, within historical Christianity, we don't believe that God has a gender. However, the way that he has decided to reveal himself is through the masculine plural, and then ultimately by becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So we don't believe that God has a gender. In fact, the fact that God creates humanity in his image and he creates them male and female, those are two aspects of the image of God. And so that's the completeness. So historical Christianity has never argued that God is gendered. Jesus is gendered in the sense that during the incarnation, he becomes a human man, but he's still fully man and fully God. But God is spirit. And right, as the scripture says, we worship him in spirit and in truth. But nobody's arguing that. What's that? Sorry?
That always blows my mind.
God is the same all the time, right? He's always good. God is all the same all the time. Right?
Yeah, but we do see that in scripture, God has revealed himself through the masculine plural. And there are aspects of God's character that we see within Scripture that do actually communicate. Jesus says that he longs to gather Israel like a mother hen collects her chicks. So we see aspects of, the feminine of God, not meaning that God is feminine, but that the image of God reflects both the masculine and the feminine. And that's why when, the two become one flesh, there's a uniting of that reflects the image of God as well within the covenant of marriage.
Do you actually believe that the majority of Christians really believe that God is not masculine, that God is has both aspects?
I mean, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe.
How many would tell you, that God's not a man? They've never been taught this.
Well, I was taught it growing up. I was taught it in when I was a child, when I went to seminary, when I went to Bible college. I was taught it in graduate school. I would say I would say a few things to that. I would say, in one sense, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe, because what historical biblical Christianity articulates is what they should believe. There are Christians who run around saying all sorts of things that are not in conformity to biblical, historical, Orthodox Christianity. And they shouldn't believe that because it's irrelevant. And so if one Christian believes something that is not in line with biblical Christianity, I mean, that's on them. So God is not gendered, but he does express through inspired scripture the masculine the masculine pronoun.
That's pretty convenient. I mean, for an all-knowing, all-loving God to understand that human beings were going to take that and abuse it to put their boot on the neck of women for eons. It's pretty interesting.
All right, so that clip there, they broke down some things. Wes kind of flexes a little bit with his schooling and how much he's learned about historical Christianity versus what people have been taught, which is what Billy is talking about. And Billy's right about that. And Wes is also right saying it doesn't really matter what the majority of them believe if this is what it is, right? It's the concrete facts. It's kind of like when somebody says that America is a democracy, and that's what a majority of people know and believe and what they've been taught. But then in actuality, America is a constitutional republic. It's like just those two things there. It's like, that's what a lot of people believe, but this is what it actually is. So it's okay. Yeah, okay, that's what they believe. But in actuality, in regards to the law, in regards to the founding of the country, the structure of the country, it's a constitutional republic. So, I just that came to mind. Now, what we're moving on to next is just slavery. Just found it very interesting that Billy kind of brought this up. It's interesting how so many people that you feel are, because I've been watching Billy for a long time. And Billy's been at it for a very, very long time. And you see them at first and you're like, this is coveted knowledge, forbidden knowledge, and these people have it. And then as you grow up and as you start exposing yourself, you start realizing, a little bit of what he's trying to bring up. And I don't know if these are straw man arguments or what, but you start to see he's kind of bringing up, he's like, the Bible's had the foot on the neck of women and this and that. And then he starts bringing up slavery and how, what do you mean? Slavery was okay. And it's like, whoa, you want to believe in something that condones slavery? But they have a little bit of discussion about that. And it reminds me of something that Vivek said about America. I'm just going to remind myself about that. And I'm going to get into it after this clip. Let's go.
The most quoted verse of the Bible in the Bible is a version of Exodus 34:6, which fundamentally describes who God is, that he's compassionate and loving, full of grace and mercy and abounding in steadfast love. And so, in fact, if you read the book of Jonah, the beef that Jonah has with God, the reason why he doesn't want to go to Nineveh is because he believes that God is so loving that if he tells the Ninevites to repent and they repent, God is going to forgive them. So fundamentally, we have the picture of God consistently throughout the Bible, both in the Old and New Testaments, as being a God who is rich in love and mercy and abounding in steadfast kindness. And so we want a God who is just. And just to speak very briefly to the slavery issue, I mean, Leviticus 25 condemns by death the man stealing. So stealing someone and selling them into slavery. And the fact that the 10 Commandments are prefaced with, you are a nation who was slaves. I'm the God of Israel who brought you out of Egypt. So there's a fundamental difference, and there's lots of literature on this. I would encourage people to read my friend Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster? He's written some excellent stuff. He's also written on Did God Command Genocide in the Old Testament? He's a leading expert in the field of a comparative analysis of ancient Near Eastern war literature. And so there are very coherent explanations for these things, and that slavery within ancient Israel was very, very different from what slavery around the ancient Near East was like. And on top of that, once again, when abolition movements happen, what's that? Sorry, Billy?
I said slavery continued on throughout the Bible with no problems.
But it was always undergirded by the fact that this was not the ideal, that this was something that should not be done. And even slavery within ancient Israel was fundamentally different than slavery around the ancient Near East. This is not a contested fact. You can look at the scholarship of individuals like Wright, who's written extensively on this. He's an ancient Near Eastern ethicist, and there's vast difference between the law codes in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, and something like the Code of Hammurabi, which puts people on a tier system and gives different punishments depending on where they are within society. That's not true in ancient Israel. If you were a king and you stole somebody and you sold them into slavery, they would punish you by death.
But you steal somebody else's slave. You can't steal somebody else's slave. That's not a good thing to do, right? The point that I'm making here, I got to say something before I get out of here, is the Bible is full of contradictions. The biggest problem that we have is we're dealing with a civilization on this planet that is psychologically impaired. Human beings are psychologically impaired. This entire planet. We're living on an insane asylum. Earth is an absolute insane asylum. Mental illness has spread throughout the planet Earth like a complete virus. And when you take a text like the biblical text, knowing that human beings globally are mentally ill, this entire planet is a mental insane asylum. And I'm talking everyone. All 8 billion, whatever number of people we have now, are all mentally ill. And what I mean is there's different levels of mentally ill. We all have trauma that we're not dealing with. We all have internal issues. We all have situations that shadow work that needs to be done. And some people are at higher levels of mental illness than others. Most of us are functional mental illness people. But when you take a look at the biblical text and you start going through this information, and it's the way that it's laid out, it becomes a proponent of more divide and conquer tactics. It becomes a proponent of racism. It becomes a proponent of slavery. It becomes a proponent of all these things that are dark and ill, including murder and killing in the name of God, which has been done how many millions of times. So my thing about the biblical text is it actually authored by the creator of the universe, or is it authored by the dark forces of, maybe, if this Satan is real, Satan himself? And the reason why I say that is because all-knowing, all-loving God, omnipotent and omniscient, that is creating not only this universe, probably most likely multiple universes, because a creator never stops creating, especially with infinite power, is now at some point going to author a text that is going to allow human beings to misinterpret it and take it in his name and begin to slay people, torture people, and enslave people worldwide, to claim that you're chosen ones, to set up a state of chosen people, and then to even claim that you have chosen land, and to torture and kill even more people, women and children, in modern times, still going on till this very day. To me, that doesn't seem like a very intelligent being, especially a being that knows the beginning and the end. So if you know the beginning and the end, you have a certain level of foreknowledge. You have advanced knowledge that goes beyond. You know what's the ending before the end even occurs. So you set up everything for success. Why? Because a genius solves problems before they happen. And I'm going to drop the mic on that.
With some of that too, I think came back on.
Yeah. I gotta get to this meeting.
Yeah, there's old stuff that it's hard to comprehend, but the thing that continued to change my life was Jesus, and the core of it was love conquers all things.
I can't miss it.
So yeah. Keep going.
All right, brother.
We can do a follow
I
up.
really appreciate it, Billy. Thanks so much for interacting.
So, believe it or not, there was no meeting. There was no meeting whatsoever. Billy just got called out. And the thing that I was reminded that Vivek talked about is when people would question America and how, America's founded by racists and slave owners and this and that. And because of that, this whole thing has to be torn down that we have today. But Vivek brought up how, America always strives for an ideal. And I just found that very similar to what he was talking about, which makes sense. I mean, Christian nation, Christian values. But America always strives for an ideal. So every man being created equal, they may not have been talking about black men or the slaves that they had at the time. But then you strive for this ideal, and then you realize that's not right. Bring these people up. You realize that's not right. Bring these women up. Then you realize that's not right. Let some people in who are also immigrants, legally. And then you strive for an ideal, constantly striving for an ideal. And so, I've always just, not to get off on a tangent, but I've always noticed that America letting on all these people, Canada does it too, but North America, Canada, the white population accused of being the most racist. But it's like, you go to Sweden, you don't find the same ideology of like, let all these people in, let's mix up. You don't find that in all these other places that are like all white or all black or all Indian or all Pakistani. They don't allow, like, North America seems to be the only ones, and the UK to their own detriment, but North America really has this ideal of like, let's let everybody in, let's work on this whole thing, build the American dream. So there's an ideal that we strive for. So I think that's the same thing that Wes was talking about there. I just want to call out quickly, Billy Carson suggesting that the Bible was written by Satan. That is something that people who are ungodly will do. They'll try to inverse everything. We've seen the man-woman inverse. We've seen the good-bad inverse. And this just goes right along with that, Satan actually being the one that wrote the Bible. I have to say, my own bias, I feel Billy Carson is a very godless person. Although he says he believes in God, I always watch out for people who say they believe in God, will not say Jesus. And hey, listen, not my religion, but at least Jewish people will say Hashem. At least Muslim people will say Allah. But there's this other section of people who will just say God. And it's like, what God are they talking about? And honestly, a lot of them, especially Hollywood, entertainment, media, like Billy, they're usually talking about a dark God. And that's for another episode. But after this debate that you just saw, directly after, this happened.
Billy Carson is attempting to sue me. For those of you who don't know, I was invited to interact with Billy on a podcast that he agreed to come on. It was not his podcast, where he was notified beforehand who I was and what we'd be talking about. After that debate took place, Billy attempted to suppress the footage. That didn't really work. I've released clips from that conversation. Well, Billy does not want you to see those clips and has sent me a cease and desist letter. I was really hoping that this could be an opportunity for Billy to learn, to see the major errors that he's been repeating and turn this into a learning experience. I even offered to follow up with Billy in order to show him how and where he could find accurate and credible resources in order to make sure that what he was saying was verifiably correct going forward in the future, so he and his audience could learn and proceed knowledgeably. Billy did not agree. But unfortunately for Billy, agreeing to a debate, losing that debate, and feeling embarrassed about that loss does not constitute legitimate grounds to litigate. Billy, I will agree to all the terms and conditions of the cease and desist letter that you have sent me if you agree to run it back, sit down with me in person, and have another discussion. This is my formal response.
So that's what Wes said directly after he got the cease and desist. Also, just so you guys know, this gentleman in the middle, he who's just a moderator, who's just in the middle, just trying to, keep it civil, keep it together. He also got sued, and the person who edited the video also got sued. None of it really stuck. And Billy Carson just kind of went into kind of a, I don't know, he kind of just went wild. His wife released a video saying he was sick with pneumonia. He said he was sick. He said he almost died and he wasn't in his right mind before the video. Well, just as he was recording that debate, there's just a lot of excuses. He tried to get the video banned. He tried to get the video completely censored. He's tried a lot of things. Anybody who's commenting on this video, he's trying to send cease and desist to as well. But we're still going to show just a little clip via someone else. Let's go.
You follow through on these lawsuits. Billy, you don't want to go down this path, my guy. And yeah, basically this ends with Billy just kind of throwing a fit.
Cult is so huge and so massive. I've got people in every area of politics. And yes, I still call them polytricksters, but I've got people in politics. I've got people in 3-letter agencies. They come on tour with me. I've got people in government. I've got people in countries.
What
powerful people.
I got people in countries? What does that mean? I got people in countries too, Billy. I got friends in London. I got friends in Paris. I got friends in Dubai. Like, what is, I got people in countries mean?
That support. I've got billionaires. I've got billionaires' numbers on my cell phone.
All right.
Billionaires that I can just call right now and have casual conversations with.
Okay.
I hang out with them. I got powerful people behind me. So you think you got powerful people behind you and you got zealots behind you? Congratulations.
We've never made these claims. What is this, Billy?
You thought I was just some dumb black guy.
Oh, no.
That just happened to get a little lucky with a couple of clips online and gain some popularity.
I don't think race has ever been brought up in this entire debacle. I don't think anyone's ever mentioned anything about you being black, anything about you having an Asian wife. I literally don't know a single person that made any ad hominem attacks about you, your ethnicity, your wife's ethnicity, or your family. So I don't know where this is coming from. Now, Billy.
Whole attack. He just went on this whole attack. The Christian community said that they're after him. It's a Christian mafia that's attacking him. And then he goes on this rant that you just heard where he's saying that he has people in three-letter agencies that go with him on tour. I have seen many videos and have looked into it of people calling him some kind of Fed. And I don't know, that semi-confirms it because he's not really expanding on it. But there have been people who said that he is involved with a 3-letter agency. Very interesting. So that is what ends up happening with Wes and Billy Carson. So he's gone into a meltdown mode. The video where he went on that crazy rant about 3-letter agencies and having powerful people and being able to do things behind closed doors, I guess. He put that on private because it got such negative backlash. People started making videos about it. You cannot just put copyright strikes on anyone you want. Fair use. The way I use videos is fair use. The way you just saw that other guy using a video, fair use. So if you do that enough, YouTube will actually take away your channel. And enough is usually like 1 or 2 times. So actually, it's usually 1 time. If they figure out you did it 1 time, they'll take down your channel because you violated a copyright claim system that they have. So that is what happened with Billy and Wes. Billy Carson has been called out. I think it's about time. You know, in my conversation with Eddie Bravo, I actually spoke about this with Eddie, and I was like, it's really weird that Joe's willing to talk to Billy Carson about all sorts of things like Thoth and Emerald tablets. And then Eddie goes on this rant. He goes, oh, Billy can bring up Emerald tablets, but I can't talk about the earth being flat. He's like, these guys can talk about Emerald tablets and all this stuff. Had to be the funniest part of the interview. But yeah, interesting. And, you know, I say all that to say it's time for another Eddie Bravo episode on JRE. Yeah, you had Billy Carson. You figure out he's a fraud. You got this Christian scholar on. Give us a refresh. I think every 3 months there should be a refresh of Eddie Bravo, Alex Jones, Joey Diaz, a fight companion. Refresh the day one fans with what we want. You know what I mean? And once a year you talk to Trump, even if he's not in politics. You just shoot. You know what I mean? You just talk to Trump a little bit. I think that would be great. Get some stories. You know, forget about politics. Get him comfortable. Get him a little drunk. I know he doesn't drink. Get him something. You know, smoke in the room before he gets in. Get a little contact high. Get him talking. You know what I mean? Just something. But anyways, guys, just wanted to show you that. I got to be honest. I always expose my biases. Never really liked Billy Carson. I don't like people who are for the inversing of good and evil and trying to walk people down that path. I am Christian myself. You know, you guys, I talk about that all the time. And That's it. I just wanted to let you guys know that. But like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Oh, and the timestamps. 9 minutes, 56 seconds, 35 minutes, 36 seconds, 1 hour, 25 minutes, 36 seconds. That's where they talk about slavery. 35, 36 is where they talk about gender. 9 minutes, 56 seconds is where they talk about, basically Billy getting caught off guard, saying false information. And you can find it at WESHUFF, Wes Huff. That is who Joe Rogan just interviewed. Anyways, guys, I'm out.